Go ahead, Doug.
All right. Hey, guys, I appreciate everyone hopping on here, getting ready for our ninth installment of Take Five with Frank. This evening, we've got Sheriff Mike Strada from Sussex County on our Take Five with us. I've gotten to know Mike quite a bit over the course of the last year or so since entering the race. He's been a friend, he's been a mentor, and he's been great with me in terms of guiding me not just through Sussex, but some of the critical issues that are facing the district. I've spent a lot of time with him that Mike and I will talk about a little later, but I wanted to just a brief bio on the sheriff, and then have him do a little intro, and then we've got a ton of questions, Mike, as you can imagine, given what's gone on the last 60 days or so. But we had them coming in the moment we announced it, that we were doing this Take Five. Sheriff Strada has been involved in public service all his life and is currently serving his third three-year term as Sussex County Sheriff. Sheriff Strada enlisted in the military after graduating from high school and served 4 years as a sergeant with the 82nd Airborne out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He's a decorated veteran of Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, serving both in Iraq and Saudi Arabia. After being honorably discharged from the military, Sheriff Strada went on to pursue a career in law enforcement. He began his law enforcement career with Morris County Sheriff's Office, where he was assigned to the Criminal Investigation Crime Lab Unit. In 1995, Sheriff Strada joined the Mount Olive Township Police Department. In 2013, Sheriff Strada successfully ran for Sussex County Sheriff and began serving in 2014. He has honorably served and protected Sussex County for the last 6.5 years, where he lives with his wife and 3 daughters. Sheriff Strada, thank you so much for joining us today here. If you wouldn't mind taking it away and doing an introduction.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you everybody who's taken time out of their busy schedules to join us tonight. I just want to first off say, how much of an honor and a privilege it is for me to serve as the Sussex County Sheriff. It is quite a role, and it's quite a task, but I couldn't ask to do anything better right now than to serve our community. I got involved. I've been a 27-year law enforcement officer, and I decided to, run for sheriff because I didn't believe, and you see it maybe now, somewhat now, is I didn't believe that the officers in the sheriff's office were engaged enough with the community. They weren't doing what I thought they could do to better protect and serve the community. That's one of the main reasons why I've run for office. There needed to be a change, and I ran on time for a change. But I'll just start off by saying that, and then Frank, if we want to get to any questions, again, just want to thank everybody for allowing me, to participate tonight.
No, I appreciate that, Sheriff. Thank you. As on these Take Fives, we've tried to make them sort of relevant to what's been going on, in the state and the country and around the world, and yours is pretty timely. We've had doctors on, we've had small business owners, we've had legislators come on and talk about all the issues affecting them, not just with the COVID crisis, but the economic downturn. And I really do think the events of the last couple of weeks has really turned a lot of people's focus toward law enforcement. So I really appreciate you taking the time. We were going to do this, I think, a little later, but things got, obviously pretty exciting over the course of the last few weeks. Again, a ton of questions. I'm glad we have one person on because there's a lot here. The first question comes across as, well, we can Google your name and find your personal bio. Could you take a moment, Sheriff Strada, and shed some light on your personal experiences and different roles that you've had in law enforcement over your career, and what led you to take the steps to run for sheriff in 2013?
That's a great question, Frank. And I graduated the police academy in 1993. I worked at the Morris County Sheriff's Office for a brief period of time, and then I then transferred to the Mount Olive Police Department, where I served, a lot of time not only as a road officer but also as a detective supervisor there. And then I decided, it was a good opportunity for me to run for sheriff. And the first time I ran, I didn't succeed. I came close, but I was running against an 18-year incumbent, which, as we know, in the political world is very tough. But I did beat him the second time, and so I'm at the sheriff now. But again, some of the things that I focused on right away when I became sheriff is the first thing is training. I wanted to make sure that all our officers had the proper training that they needed to do their job. I wanted to make sure our rules and regulations, our policies and procedures met the standards. And I also, two other things I was passionate about was enhancing the inmate work program, which we were successful in doing. We have an inmate work program that's probably one of the best in the state. We send inmates out, we take inmates out, and they do work at nonprofits, at churches, different areas, and they do a great job, and they save a lot of taxpayers' money. And you know what? The inmates in the program benefit from it too. They get out of the facility and they get to do a little bit of work, get back to their community. And the third thing is I really enhanced our programs with which I believe is our most vulnerable in our community, and that's our youth and our seniors. We have a large senior population in Sussex County, and as you know, every day that somebody comes up with some kind of a new scam. So I'm constantly out talking to the seniors to try to protect them and keep them safe, whether it's home burglary awareness, preparing for storms, avoiding credit card scams. And we also have a LEAD program, which used to be DARE. I'm sure everybody's familiar with DARE, but now they changed to LEAD, Law Enforcement Against Drugs. So my officers are in 11 schools in the county, and we talk to these youths about the danger of drugs, and we really establish a great relationship with them. And I think it pays off in the long run when you can establish good relationships, not only with your senior community, but your youth and family members. And I think it really pays off, especially when you have times like we're going through right now. I don't think anybody has an issue with the Sussex County Sheriff's Office. I've been open and very transparent since I've been sheriff. And we're here to serve the community, and we'll continue to serve the community. And we won't let the actions of today stop us from doing our job.
Right. Terrific. I appreciate that. Now, you mentioned that you won on your second go around. Did you have a good campaign manager on your second go around? I'm curious.
I had a great campaign manager on my second go around, but my first go around, I was by myself. I was pretty much on my own, and everybody's like, "You're crazy for running against this guy. He's been there 18 years." And I said, "Well, look, you got to be in it to win it." So
Right.
We came close, but
Good. The second question comes in. Obviously, it has to do with some of the COVID issues. $3.4 billion was allocated, and I guess we know that of the $3.4 billion that was allocated across the district, we knew that 2 counties in all of New Jersey got zero funding. 4 counties got zero funding. 2 of those counties were in District 5, including Sussex. Sussex got zero funding out of the first CARES Act. Could you speak to what Sussex might have been able to get from any amount of funding, or where you thought you might have been able to see some funding go toward that you obviously didn't get?
I mean, we from the beginning, I mean, we had needs just like everybody did. The big words, PPE. Everybody needed PPE. But to get PPE, you need funding. And the other thing was test sites. A lot of the bigger counties that got funding were able to establish test sites very quickly. Here in Sussex County, we received no funds, and we didn't receive any support as far as this test site goes, and we got it up and running a little bit late, I think, but it is up and running now. But it was the efforts of the Sheriff's Office, the freeholders, and our Office of Emergency Management that made that happen. But certainly, it just seems like whenever anything happens out in Sussex County, whether we're trying to recover from a storm and receive funding or something of this nature, we never really seem to get any money. We get kind of left alone, and it is a little frustrating.
Yeah, I remember this past winter when I was coming out there a lot. There was a storm. It wasn't a huge storm. It hit Sussex a little tougher than it did Bergen and Passaic. But you guys were out of commission for more than a week. And it just kind of speaks to, the point that you just made is, sometimes when there's a crisis that hits, Sussex gets hit more than most. And it would be great if Sussex was a little closer to the top of the list in terms of assistance or aid.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even, it's just about being fair. I mean, we're no different from the citizens in Morris or Bergen or Passaic. But yet, when it comes down to funding, and I'm not saying we need to receive the funding that a Bergen would get or a Passaic would get or an Essex would get, but we certainly deserve our fair share. and it just seems like we never get that fair share, and hopefully that'll change.
Yeah, no, I remember taking a look at and it being sort of a head scratcher, Mike, on why was the funding zero? I agree with you. If you want to look at some equivalent distribution across the four counties that Josh Gottheimer runs, maybe you get 90-10, 80-20, but 100-0 just seemed a little, just seemed a bit ludicrous to me. And I looked at the formula, and the formula that they used in the allocation for CARES funding was a HUD formula, or a HUD allocation, housing and urban development. And for the life of me, I still can't figure out, and I've not gotten a response as to why they used a HUD allocation formula to distribute funds for a health and an economic disaster. So I imagine I'm not going to get a response back, but I agree with you, Mike. I think, you're supposed to allocate according to need. You're supposed to allocate according to population or things like that. But 100-0 has always thrown me as kind of crazy. Another question comes by. It is COVID related. As a top law enforcement official in Sussex, you've been faced with tremendous challenges over these past 90 days due to the COVID-19. What steps have you taken during this crisis to keep the residents of Sussex County and your fellow law enforcement officials safe?
That's a great question, Frank. And as the sheriff, I also serve as the county emergency management coordinator. So I have that role. So under me is the 24 municipalities and the local emergency management coordinators. So anything at the local level that is needed, that they need, they reach out to the county for resources. And if we can't fulfill those resources, we reach out to the state of New Jersey in hopes that they'll, fulfill the resources that we need. But really, we concentrated a lot on getting a lot of PPE out here. There was, a very, very slow response from the state for our requests. They went unanswered for quite a while. Not surprised by that. It's happened before. But basically, what we do is, we distributed PPE where we felt it was needed the most, to the first responders first. And then we started concentrating, or when we started getting requests from the nursing homes, we started supplying them what we could. In addition to that, I adjusted my officers' schedules to reduce the possible exposure to COVID. And then in addition to that, we eventually opened a COVID test site, which is still open today.
Terrific. I appreciate that. There's, clearly this is something that affects, not just all walks of life, but every profession, whether it's in the public or the private sector. And I think that the people that listen on these calls are pretty interested in hearing, what a doctor does for her people and for her patients and her other coworkers. And that goes right down the line with, we had a couple of folks on who had small businesses here. And people, obviously the crisis is affecting them, but they want to hear a small business owner talk about their families, their employees, and their employees' families. So it doesn't surprise me, Mike, that when this came in, people wanted to know not just how you take care of the folks in Sussex, but how you take care of all the officers that report to you. So I appreciate that response. When you and I knew each other for a number of months before you and I came together, I actually decided to follow your lead with the Sussex County Board of Freeholders in opposition to the sanctuary state policies. And that was when you and I started to work pretty closely together. This referendum made it clear that your county, Sussex, is staunchly opposed to these sanctuary state regulations. Do you see policies coming from Trenton as a threat to the law and order within Sussex, especially given light with what's going on now?
I just think it's dangerous. It's just very dangerous when you allow individuals, and some of them with criminal backgrounds, to give them basically a free pass and say, hey, you can come to New Jersey. You're going to be safe here. It's okay here. And that's just, you're putting all of our citizens at danger when you do that. And I'm all about legal immigration. I'm not so much in favor of illegal immigration, especially when individuals have criminal backgrounds. And to me, it makes no sense why the governor does not want to keep the citizens of our state safe. I mean, we've all seen stories of immigrants, illegal immigrants that, were let out of jail. They were not turned over to ICE officers, and they reoffended in horrible ways. And I have made it very clear from the beginning that, I don't agree with all of those AG guidelines in reference to immigration reform. And I said that I will make a decision when I have to. And I have called ICE and I've held inmates and I've turned them over to ICE because I'm not going to let anybody walk out the front door of our jail
Hmm.
and commit some kind of a crime. That's just not the right thing to do. If you're wanted, I mean, look, if I had a warrant out for a traffic ticket, I would have to be picked up by local law enforcement. Why would an illegal immigrant that has a criminal background not be picked up by federal agents? And it makes absolutely no sense to me, Frank. And I just very passionate about that. I don't know if you could see. I start to get a little bit angry, but it's that officer in me that just wants to keep people safe and do the right thing. And to me, it's common sense. To others,
Right.
our AG and our governor apparently not.
Yeah, look, I saw just the pure logic side of it, and living it, I know you did, and you served admirably, but September 11th in part happened because of a lack of communication between the different agencies. And in the aftermath of September 11th, I think that was one of the top things that we all made sure everybody was talking to everyone else to make sure that nothing slipped through the cracks. So when I saw this thing started to come about, I kind of thought, not that it was a joke, but I thought, are people not paying attention that the inability for party A to talk to party B and prevent something that might happen that's dangerous, just like you suggested, why wouldn't you just want that sort of transparency to happen? I don't see downside. And it wasn't until I really, sat with you and the folks, within Sussex that we started to walk through this, and I wasn't missing anything. You guys had it right. And I think, the rest of the state was kind of either going along, or like you said, there was this lack of understanding as to, the dangers that are out there all the time, and that you guys are on the front line and you guys stand on the wall. And there's nothing in my mind more important than keeping the citizens safe. So I do appreciate that. And that sort of rolls into what we've seen recently. This was a question we got in mass. In recent weeks, our nation has seen protests after the death of George Floyd at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer. As someone who has honorably served our country and our state for decades, what thoughts can you offer on this terrible tragedy and the public demonstrations that have followed?
Well, Frank, I mean, first off, all of us know, the actions of that officer were wrong. Nobody's disputing that. But the aftermath has been horrible. And, I don't care what business you're in, you're always going to have that 1% of employees that don't follow the rules, that break the rules. But should everybody be punished for that? No, not at all. And right now, the target is on every police officer in the United States because of one bad officer.
Right.
And quite honestly, I think that these individuals that are looting, that are starting fires, that are hurling bricks and bottles at officers, that's not a way to make peace. That is not how you're going to solve these issues or these problems that you said exist. And quite frankly, 99.9% of the officers do their job every day.
Mm-hmm.
They come to work. There's decisions that need to be made that officers make in a split second. What that officer in Minnesota did was wrong. Nobody's disputing it.
Right.
But there's no reason at all right now why that officers, the other good officers in this country, should be punished for this one man's actions.
No, I agree. And, I've told a number of people, I've been around a while, and I have never seen that before. And I've seen like ugly stuff, and you see pictures, seeing, his knee on that gentleman's neck and watching him die on video was shocking. And I do think something needs to be done. And to your point, that 1% or probably 1/10 of people who don't follow the rules shouldn't be painted across the board for any group. So I appreciate that. And that kind of rolls into the next, the next question we had, which is on the heels of this. This defunding the police has become a pretty popular chant among the protesters at Antifa. I think I know your thoughts on what those sentiments are as a law enforcement official. And I think as most people, when we talk, know that that's not a solution at all. But in your opinion, can you speak to what other solutions you might have to improve the practices and relationships with the men and women who entrust themselves with folks like you?
You got to have good leadership at the top, but also, Frank, what you need good training. You need to get your officers trained properly. I probably that officer maybe that was involved in Minnesota maybe hadn't had any retraining or those other officers. I don't know what their training is. I can tell you that New Jersey's police academy is 6 months long. It's very extensive, and we also receive hundreds of hours of training throughout our career.
Right.
Specifically, every year when we qualify, we go over use of force. And if policies change, our officers are aware of what changed. But it comes down to good training, good policies in place, and good leadership that's going to see that your officers are properly trained and they're ready to do their job the right way. And I think those 1% of officers, they, maybe this isn't the career for them, or they haven't been trained right. They don't have the leadership above them to make sure that they're doing their job, or there's not enough oversight. So there's always things that can change. You can never get enough training. I could say my officers are great, but you know what? Tomorrow, if some training came up, some new stuff, I would absolutely be the first ones to send them, because you can never get better.
Yeah, no, I understand. And look, one of the things I think about, clearly you see a lot of adults rioting and on both sides of the fence, you see people like yourself who want to make sure that the training is right and people are thinking about the right thing to do. And, understandably, there are folks out there who have every right to raise their voice and protest about it. But my thought, and this is just kind of off the cuff here, thinking about, when my kids were young and they were looking at the situations surrounding September 11th, I think it's important to reach out to, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds and talk to them about things like this. And, I think you're right, because if these are the people that are looking at the kids are looking at the television and that's what they're seeing, you don't want them to move into their teen years with this understanding that, well, all I'm seeing is the cop and George Floyd, and he died in the protests. And it makes sense from my standpoint. And I've seen you do it, and I see how you talk to people and how you make people understand that there are two sides. I just hope we're doing that with a lot of the much younger kids, and they understand that bad happens in the world, but there's a whole lot more good that happens. So.
Yeah, and you know what? Unfortunately, Frank, this what happened just recently is it's going to be a long road to recovery.
Yeah, no, understood. Speaking of long road to recovery, let's talk about Governor Murphy for a moment. Governor Murphy has restricted the activities of businesses of all sizes since the COVID outbreak, with many of these restrictions still in place today, even though you're starting to see come off. Law enforcement has continually been put in a challenging spot between those who want to open up their businesses and Governor Murphy's executive orders and edicts. How have you handled this in Sussex County, knowing obviously that a lot of business owners have to feed their families and they have to make sure that they're paying employees who have to feed their families as well?
Yeah, I feel so bad for the small business owners. I feel bad for anybody that's out of work during this. I think that we should be able to open. The governor should lessen the restrictions. I haven't personally been asked to enforce any orders, and quite frankly, I'm not going to enforce any orders. I don't see a need. Like, look what our governor just did. I guess it's okay, for him to violate his own executive order, but we have to,
right.
But we have to follow his orders. It's kind of like, you get a ticket for speeding, Frank, but he doesn't, because he's the governor. Right. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, look, as soon as this happened, and as you know, I mean, District 5 is home to more than 19,600 small businesses, and every one of them took this seriously. They understood what was happening. But I think when you start to see big box stores opening up and you start to see stores opening up that are no different than stores that have been asked to stay closed. And I'm not talking, I mean this in a bad way, about gyms where you need to have a lot more, I think, control around things like social distancing. But there are lots and lots of restaurants and stores and bars and other stores that could easily self-police, could easily say, yep, I see what the governor, I see what the state, I see what they're looking at here, and I see how Walmart and all these other large box stores are taking care of it. And I just don't understand why this governor doesn't look to the small business owners who, quite honestly, they don't run a business 8 hours a day. They run a business 24 hours a day. So they understand the concept of how to make sure that their organization, their firm, their company stays in business going forward. So I just talked to so many people who basically had their plan in place months ago. If this is about, flattening the curve, if this is about maintaining social distancing, they had plans that were better plans than some of the Home Depots I saw people walking into. They were separating them, but there were no masks. There was no opportunity when they came in to ensure that if somebody picks up an item off the shelf, that it wasn't touched by 5 or 6 people before that who may not have been protected. So, my issue, Michael, has always been around, like you said, the governor thinks the rules don't apply to him, but they apply to everyone else. But then he creates what businesses can open and what businesses can operate and how they can operate, but other businesses can't. So we can take an hour and an hour longer and go through this.
Yes.
The question I have here also, Governor Murphy, because there's a lot of questions that start with his name, has continually punished businesses to reopen. And then you just brought this up. This weekend, he stood shoulder to shoulder, quite literally, with Black Lives Matter protesters in violation of his own directives. These are the same ones he uses to beat up the business owners. Clearly, you see this as a double standard. Is there anybody, and how is he ever challenged on this double standard? Or is it just, sorry, I'm the boss?
Well, I mean, I think we saw Assemblyman Weber in Morris County address it with the state police colonel. The colonel is the one who is signing off on these executive orders with the governor. And clearly the governor violated his own order. So, why isn't he being held accountable for that? But it's insulting to anybody who may have received a summons for whatever they violated.
Sure.
For the governor to just do that, it's insulting. It's a slap in the face. These individuals are out there just trying to make some money to feed their families and support their families. Even have a friendly discussion with the lady in Randolph who had a discussion with other business owners, and she turns around and receives a summons.
Yep.
That didn't come from the police. I guarantee you that didn't come from the police. That came from the prosecutor. That came from the attorney general. Guaranteed. I can guarantee you that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And look, I was there. I was there for that rally. I thought it was great. It was handled with class. It was handled the right way. And she had business owners come in and talk about how it was hurting. They had candidates. I spoke as well. They had current legislators who came in and talked about it. It was peaceful. It was smart. It was relevant. And, the poor woman gets home and she's got $2,000 in tickets. And it was an event that talking about how these people are dipping into their 401ks. They're dipping into retirement savings just so they can feed their family. So, something like this just aggravates the hell out of me when you see Governor Murphy out there defying his own orders. At the same time, he's writing $2,000 tickets to people who are already suffering. I did the same thing in Bergen County. I was at another small business rally, and it's the same thing. But there are a lot more people out there, Sheriff, like you, who were saying, not that they're going to look the other way, but they're much more sensitive to the people and the businesses that they have to look in the eye every single day. The stores that they buy their sandwiches and their meats in. So I'm glad law enforcement is at least taking a little more of a sensitive look that, this isn't a 30-day issue. This is going on now 4 months, and it's going to go a little bit longer. So I appreciate it. I think we have time for one more question. Is that all right, Kelly, before you yell at me?
Yeah.
Okay.
One more.
Okay. Sussex is clearly thought sometimes is the forgotten part of our state. I've traveled all over Sussex, meeting with you and many of the residents around. As your congressman, how can I best support you in this role? I know that Josh doesn't get out there as much as he should, and that's a question I get from people that, hey, what could you do for me? And my response to them is, this is what I'd like to do. What would you like to see from a congressman?
I would just like to see some more funding come back to law enforcement, or even just emergency management. just more of our tax dollars coming back to our communities. So we can, maybe hire some more police officers, maybe get some more training that we might need. Maybe upgrade our 911 communications center. Other things to better protect our community. But it just doesn't seem like we get our fair share, not only from the state or the federal government. It just seems like Sussex is kind of on its own. And I guess we're kind of used to it now. And since I've been sheriff, I've been through many storms and many things that have happened here. And we kind of learn out here. We kind of expect not to get anything, but it's starting to get. I think people are starting to get tired of it. Obviously, our taxes are not going down; they're going up. And what are we getting in return? You have to look at that, and people are really starting to look at that nowadays. They are paying a lot of money in property taxes. What am I getting in return? So it would be nice to get more money back from the federal government for sure.
Yeah, look, it's a simple math equation. We know we've got high taxes. At the very least, you expect a return on that investment. And not only, to your point, are we seeing taxes continue to go up, and quite honestly, I think they're going to go up given what's gone on now at a much more accelerated rate. Not just because of the crisis we have going on, and the governor's going to try and fill some sort of gap in his budget, but you still continue to see people leave this state, Sheriff. We're for the third year in a row, we're the #1 exodus state. Typically, the people leaving the most are the ones who make the most. And that creates a tremendous burden on the middle class and, quite honestly, the upper class, because it's not the top 10% that are leaving. It's the top 1%. It's the top 1/2 of 1% that are leaving. So something has to be done, in my opinion, to stop the exodus, stop the pain, create an opportunity for our residents to say, you know what, someone's watching out for me. Because I don't think, that's the #1 complaint I have throughout the whole district is from your 1% all the way down to the people who sit and work every day. What are my people doing for me? What are the people that I elect doing for me every day? And I know when I talk to people in Sussex about you, there isn't a single person I talk to who doesn't think that you get up every single day and try and figure out how to make your community and your residents safe. And if you don't think that resonates in Bergen County and Passaic and some of the others, you're wrong. I think you're a model law enforcement officer. I think you're a model for which I think a lot of people look at and say, that guy's got my back. So I know we went over a little bit here, but I did want to thank you, Sheriff, for coming on here, and appreciate everyone else for coming on here. I think you do a tremendous job. And I will tell you before I go off, I'm glad you're on that wall, Sheriff. I appreciate it.
Thanks. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the time the listeners took to hear us speak tonight. And listen, my office door is always open. I'm always available. If anybody has anything for me, please reach out. I'm here to serve the community. Frank, I wish you the best of luck in the primary. I got your back, and hopefully you'll be victorious.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Is there an email address you have? Because I'm getting a couple of texts here of people asking how to get in touch with you, and I do not want to give out your home address.
Oh, it's you could do mstrada at sussexcountysheriff.com, one word. So MSTRADA at sussexcountysheriff.com.
Great. Sheriff, I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we'll do this again.
Thanks, Frank. Take care. Good luck.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.